The cameras were flashing so violently, it almost felt like they were trying to capture not just images, but secrets. The red carpet of the Marty Supreme premiere stretched like a glittering river of lights, gowns, and power, and at its center, two figures approached a collision that would ignite whispers across the world. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, walked forward with her signature poise, her every step calculated, her expression carefully balanced between composure and anticipation. She knew the spotlight would not just see her, it would judge her, dissect her, and magnify every reaction. But even Meghan could not have anticipated the exact nature of the storm she was about to face. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You may be wondering, what exactly happened that night to make headlines before the afterparty even began? Was it a whisper, a glance, a subtle snub? Or was it something far more deliberate, something that cut deeper than any rumor or media critique ever could? The answer, as shocking as it sounds, came in one word, or rather, the refusal of one word. Duchess. Gwyneth Paltrow, the epitome of Hollywood independence and self-styled elegance, chose that precise moment to draw a line, to withhold a title that Meghan had carried proudly and that the public had come to associate with grace, diplomacy, and royal status. The irony was sharp. Here they were, two women who had conquered their respective worlds. Meghan in royal corridors and charitable ventures, Gwyneth in Hollywood studios and lifestyle empires. And yet, that night, everything boiled down to recognition, acknowledgement, and perhaps a hidden power play. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan's sleek heels touched the carpet. Cameras swirled, flashes popped, and journalists leaned in, hoping to catch not just a photo, but a crack in the carefully constructed veneer of royal composure. Meghan's smile was perfect, rehearsed perhaps, but behind it, her mind raced. She knew that public perception mattered more than ever, that every gesture, every word, every nod could either bolster her image or feed the media frenzy that had long shadowed her life. Imagine for a moment standing in Meghan's shoes. You've walked into countless rooms, met world leaders, and managed the press scrutiny that most people can barely imagine. And yet, even with this experience, you feel the weight of recognition, of being acknowledged for who you are and what you represent. Titles are not just words in royal life. They carry weight, they signal hierarchy, and in public, they matter immensely. So when Gwyneth's eyes met hers and a single syllable remained unspoken, Meghan felt it immediately. The omission was deliberate, a calculated denial of status that should have been automatic, courteous, even expected. But why did this matter so much? After all, Gwyneth Paltrow is not royalty. She is a Hollywood star with her own universe of influence, power, and opinion. And yet, that very independence is what made this snub sting. The world was watching, yes, but more importantly, Meghan's inner circle, advisors, and the media ecosystem that feeds on every micro-expression were watching too. One word, or the refusal of one word, had the potential to unravel carefully managed appearances and ignite debates that would rage for days, perhaps even weeks. As Meghan approached, the air seemed to change. The bustling red carpet, filled with laughter, small talk, and the clatter of camera shutters, grew tense. Even casual observers could sense the energy shift, though they might not have understood why. In one corner, Gwyneth stood with her trademark elegance, her smile calm but deliberate, her posture unyielding. Some insiders would later describe it as a Hollywood aura of untouchable independence, a statement that communicated control without uttering a single word. And it was precisely this aura that Meghan had to navigate, a subtle but potent force that challenged everything she thought she understood about public recognition, etiquette, and interpersonal dynamics. One might ask, is this just another celebrity clash, a fleeting moment blown out of proportion by the media machine? Or is it something deeper, something that touches on the very tension between old-world royalty and modern Hollywood autonomy? The answer, as we would soon learn, was far more intricate than a simple clash of personalities. It was a collision of worlds, a collision of expectations, and a collision of power, influence, and public perception. From the very beginning, the premiere had all the elements of a high-stakes drama. The venue itself sparkled like a jewel, ornate lighting, red velvet carpets, and a crowd that mingled ambition, glamour, and curiosity. Journalists prowled like predators, ready to capture anything that deviated from perfection. And there, in the midst of it all, Meghan moved with a grace honed by both personal resilience and royal training. Yet her mind could not escape the anticipation of confrontation. She was well aware that public events rarely go according to plan. But the specific nature of what awaited her that night, the refusal of acknowledgement, was something entirely new. Consider for a moment the emotional tension of that first encounter. Meghan's approach was calm, but her inner narrative was anything but. Every photographer's click echoed in her mind like a drumbeat of scrutiny. Would Gwyneth acknowledge her properly? Would the word Duchess pass from her lips, signaling respect, recognition, and understanding of Meghan's position? Or would it remain unspoken, a silent jab that communicated more than any headline ever could? The anticipation alone was almost unbearable. When the moment arrived, the world seemed to hold its breath. Meghan extended a polite greeting, her smile poised, her voice soft but clear. Gwyneth returned the greeting, but with a subtle, deliberate omission. The word Duchess was absent, hanging invisibly in the air like a ghost of civility. Meghan's face registered the impact, though her body remained composed. For anyone who has ever felt slighted in public, the sting is immediate, sharp, and often compounded by the awareness that countless eyes are analyzing every reaction. This encounter would go on to dominate headlines, social media threads, and gossip columns worldwide. But what made it especially captivating was not just the refusal itself, but the layers of context, history, and personality that surrounded it. Meghan was no stranger to public scrutiny. She had faced it relentlessly from tabloids, paparazzi, and even members of the royal institution. Gwyneth, on the other hand, had cultivated an image of independence and defiance, often deliberately subverting expectations. When these two worlds collided, the result was a moment that would be dissected endlessly, both for what was said and for what remained unspoken. Yet there was another layer to this story, one that the public would only understand over time. The refusal to acknowledge a title publicly is more than a personal slight. It is a statement about boundaries, power, and cultural perception. In Meghan's case, it was a reminder that even with fame, grace, and a title, public validation is never guaranteed. And for Gwyneth, it was a demonstration of autonomy, a declaration that Hollywood rules do not always align with royal etiquette. The tension was palpable, layered, and rich with implications that would ripple far beyond the red carpet. By the time the media had captured the moment, speculation had already begun. Fans dissected photographs, analyzing expressions, gestures, and subtle cues. Headlines splashed words like snub, tension, and unspoken feud. Social media erupted with commentary, theories, and debates about who was right, who was wrong, and what the refusal truly meant. For Meghan, the experience was a mixture of personal indignity and public theater. For Gwyneth, it was an assertion of principle, style, and perhaps even strategic mischief. The collision of these worlds was fascinating, dramatic, and utterly human in its complexity. And yet, the story didn't end there. The initial encounter, brief though it was, set the stage for a series of events that would unfold in ways no one could have predicted. Advisors whispered in private rooms, publicists drafted cautious statements, and social media buzzed with speculation. Every element of this seemingly simple encounter carried weight, resonance, and potential consequences for reputation, image, and narrative control. What makes this story truly compelling is the human element. Beyond titles, fame, and public perception, there was emotion, anger, frustration, disbelief, and even the subtle pride that drives people to assert themselves. Meghan's reaction, though measured on the surface, was a storm of feelings beneath. A mixture of disappointment, hurt, and determination. Gwyneth's stance was equally layered. Confidence, calculated defiance, and an awareness of the spectacle she had created. The interplay between these emotions, both visible and hidden, transformed a brief interaction into a moment of cultural fascination. And just when it seemed that the evening would move on, that the glimmering lights and camera flashes would return to routine glamour, the aftershocks of this encounter began to ripple outward. Insider accounts, social media posts, and expert commentary hinted at tensions that extended far beyond a single red carpet. The refusal to speak one word, though small on the surface, became emblematic of larger conflicts. Old world etiquette versus modern independence, royal protocol versus Hollywood autonomy, public expectation versus personal principle. The night of the Marty Supreme premiere was supposed to be a celebration of cinema, style, and spectacle. From the outside, it looked like any other high-profile Hollywood event. Red carpet stretched for what felt like miles, photographers jostling for the perfect angle, reporters whispering rapid-fire questions, and a sea of designer gowns glittering under the harsh, unforgiving lights. But beneath the glitter and glamour, tension coiled like a serpent, waiting for the right moment to strike. The premiere had become a stage not just for films and stars, but for one of the most anticipated encounters in recent celebrity history, Meghan Markle versus Gwyneth Paltrow. Imagine the scene. Limousines rolled up in a steady stream, each one disgorging an assortment of Hollywood royalty, actors, directors, influencers, and socialites, all carefully curated to create the perfect cocktail of fame and elegance. Journalists leaned out from behind velvet ropes, cameras clicking in staccato rhythms, flashes erupting like fireworks in every direction. Fans pressed forward, craning their necks to glimpse stars who seemed almost untouchable in real life. Their perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, and gowns that shimmered with every step. In the midst of it all, Meghan Markle emerged from the limousine with the precision of someone trained in both royal composure and media awareness. Every move was deliberate, every glance calculated, every step an unspoken message to the world. I am here, and I belong. But belonging, as Meghan would soon realize, was a more complicated matter than the red carpet might suggest. From the very first moment she set foot on the crimson pathway, she felt the invisible currents of attention pulling and testing her. Cameras followed her like predators, their lenses hungry for any crack in the polished armor she presented to the world. Journalists whispered behind microphones, speculating on her gown, her hairstyle, her poise, and yes, her interactions with Gwyneth Paltrow. It was a delicate dance, one she had performed countless times before, but the stakes felt higher. Every eye in that throng seemed attuned not just to what she wore, but to how she carried herself, to the subtle rhythms of her expressions and gestures. Gwyneth Paltrow, on the other hand, moved with a very different energy. She carried the confidence of someone who had spent decades commanding Hollywood stages, award shows, and media narratives. Her walk was measured, deliberate, almost imperious, radiating a sense of autonomy that had become her signature. Gwyneth had cultivated a persona that was untouchable yet approachable, a delicate balance that made her simultaneously enviable and intimidating. As she navigated the red carpet, photographers snapped her image from every angle, capturing a woman who seemed entirely at ease in the chaos around her. And yet, those who knew the dynamics of the evening understood that beneath that serene exterior, a calculated awareness was at play. Every smile, every nod, every pause had purpose. The intersection of these two worlds, the regal, meticulously trained presence of Meghan and the confident, Hollywood-honed autonomy of Gwyneth, was electric. From the moment they glimpsed each other across the glittering expanse, a subtle war of recognition began. Meghan's team, ever vigilant, advised her to maintain composure, to remember the poise and dignity associated with a Duchess, to project calm even in the face of provocation. Gwyneth's team, if they even had one watching this interaction, knew their client was capable of subtle defiance, a nuanced assertion of personal boundaries that would ripple through the media almost immediately. The red carpet itself seemed almost theatrical in its design, a stage laid for both spectacle and scrutiny. The velvet ropes framed the event like the edges of a theater set, cameras hanging like omnipresent witnesses. Lighting rigs cast harsh shadows and brilliant highlights in equal measure, illuminating the stars while exposing every micro-expression. For Meghan, every step felt magnified, every smile dissected, every glance interpreted. For Gwyneth, the lights accentuated her carefully crafted aura of independence, creating an almost palpable tension between her world and Meghan's. As Meghan approached, there was a collective intake of breath among onlookers. The sequence of movements, though seemingly routine, carried a weight that most attendees could barely comprehend. Meghan extended her hand in greeting, her eyes meeting Gwyneth's with a mixture of expectation and measured calm. The moment stretched, a tension-filled silence punctuated only by the incessant clicking of camera shutters. Observers later described it as the kind of moment where time itself seemed to bend, where the ordinary pulse of a premiere was replaced by an almost theatrical anticipation of conflict. And then, subtly but unmistakably, the refusal happened. The word Duchess was withheld. Gwyneth Paltrow, standing in her full Hollywood glory, chose that precise moment not to acknowledge Meghan by her title, a silent decision that spoke volumes more than any spoken insult could have. Meghan's expression flickered briefly, a micro-reaction that cameras would struggle to capture in full, yet those who were paying attention could see the ripple of shock, disbelief, and simmering indignation pass across her face. It was a reminder that, despite all the training, all the preparation, and all the poise, even someone as seasoned as Meghan was human. Even the most controlled persona can feel the sting of subtle defiance. But the impact of that single omission extended beyond the two women. Every journalist, every fan, every photographer in attendance became part of the narrative, unwitting witnesses to a moment that would explode across social media feeds and news outlets in the coming hours. Tweets speculated on body language, facial expressions, and the deeper meaning of withheld recognition. Headlines described the encounter with words like snub, tension, and royal clash. Memes emerged almost instantaneously, humor and critique blended into a cultural commentary that highlighted the collision of two worlds, the regimented traditions of royalty and the unrestrained independence of Hollywood. Inside Meghan's mind, a storm was brewing. She had navigated countless public events, each filled with cameras, whispers, and scrutiny, yet this interaction carried a weight that was unique. It wasn't just about a greeting, it was about recognition, status, and a symbolic assertion of power. Every subtle gesture mattered, every inflection was analyzed, every micro-expression could be dissected. Meghan understood that this was a moment that would define public perception, at least temporarily. She knew that how she handled this would be replayed, analyzed, and debated, long after the red carpet had been rolled up and the last limousines had departed. Meanwhile, Gwyneth seemed perfectly at ease, almost serene, yet there was a deliberate awareness in her stance. This was no accidental omission. Her confidence, her measured expressions, and the precise withholding of a single word created a tension that was both subtle and explosive. It was a demonstration of control, a declaration that Hollywood operated on a different set of rules, and that even someone with a royal title was not guaranteed automatic acknowledgement. The interplay between these two forces, the poised, dignified royal and the autonomous Hollywood star, set the stage for drama that would extend far beyond the red carpet. Photographers captured images that hinted at tension without fully explaining it. Fans debated what they saw and what they didn't. Social media erupted, the digital equivalent of an echo chamber amplifying every glance, every hesitation, every unspoken word. The red carpet had transformed from a space of glamour to a theater of conflict, and the world was watching. But even as cameras clicked and observers speculated, the premiere itself continued. Celebrities mingled, journalists scribbled notes, and flashes continued to pop like gunfire. Yet, for Meghan, the memory of that subtle snub lingered, a reminder that recognition, true acknowledgement, cannot always be commanded, even by title or status. The event had begun as a celebration, but it had already sown seeds of tension that would bloom in headlines, social media threads, and personal narratives in the days to come. As the premiere unfolded, whispers began circulating about private glances exchanged behind the scenes, strategic positioning on the carpet, and what advisors might have said in hushed tones just out of frame. The energy of the event was no longer simply glamorous. It was electric with anticipation, charged with an invisible conflict that everyone sensed but few could articulate. The public, unaware of the nuances, would only see images and snippets. Yet those images contained a story far more layered than anyone imagined. a story of power, perception, and the subtle ways influence is asserted in high-profile encounters. And then, just when it seemed that the night would proceed like any other star-studded event, the first whispers of what had occurred began to leak. Journalists who had observed the exchange shared cryptic comments, insiders hinted at tension, and fans on social media began to speculate wildly. Headlines the next morning would read with a mix of shock and intrigue, framing a single omission as a monumental clash between two worlds. The red carpet had not just witnessed glamour. It had witnessed a confrontation whose ripples would extend far beyond the venue, reaching into conversations, debates, and cultural commentary that would dominate headlines for weeks. The concept of royalty is deceptively simple in the public imagination: crowns, formal events, waving from balconies, and flawless etiquette. But for someone living it, like Meghan Markle, the reality is infinitely more complex, layered, and psychologically taxing. To understand why that night at the Marty Supreme premiere mattered so intensely to her, one must step into the intricate machinery of a royal mindset. A combination of personal ambition, public duty, emotional restraint, and constant vigilance under the unrelenting gaze of the world. From the moment Meghan arrived in the United Kingdom, she had been thrust into a world where every gesture carried meaning. A tilt of the head, a choice of color, the timing of a smile. All of it was analyzed by the public, dissected by tabloids, and debated endlessly on social media. She quickly realized that titles were more than ceremonial. They were instruments of influence, markers of hierarchy, and shields of legitimacy. The title Duchess was not just a word, it was a symbol, a reminder that she was part of a centuries-old institution, a legacy that commanded respect even among Hollywood elites who had built their power in entirely different arenas. Yet, with that awareness came pressure. Meghan was acutely aware that she was navigating two worlds simultaneously. The rigid, historical, and highly scrutinized protocols of British royalty and the freewheeling, often unpredictable dynamics of American celebrity culture. The juxtaposition of these spheres created a mental landscape that was both empowering and exhausting. In public, she had to embody the dignity of a duchess, remaining composed and measured in all interactions, while internally managing the knowledge that every slight, intentional or otherwise, could be magnified into scandal. Consider for a moment the preparation she undertook before attending events like the Marty Supreme premiere. It wasn't just about hair, makeup, and wardrobe. It was about posture, tone of voice, timing of gestures, and anticipating every potential interaction. Meghan's days leading up to high-profile appearances were structured around scenarios that could unfold, rehearsing answers to both expected and unexpected questions, mentally cataloging the personalities of everyone she might encounter, and formulating strategies to maintain both her composure and public image. Each red carpet was a battlefield, each handshake a negotiation of respect. This is why the encounter with Gwyneth Paltrow struck so sharply. Meghan's royal mindset had prepared her for countless challenges, but the specific dynamics of celebrity interactions were a different breed of complexity. Hollywood, after all, plays by a different set of rules, one that emphasizes personal branding, autonomy, and subtle demonstrations of influence rather than formal protocol. Meghan had to constantly calibrate her approach, weighing every smile, nod, and greeting against both her royal principles and the unpredictable reactions of a Hollywood star known for independence and a certain disregard for convention. Emotionally, Meghan carried a history that made such encounters even more charged. She had experienced public criticism not just as a figurehead, but as a woman, as a wife, as someone attempting to navigate intense scrutiny while maintaining dignity. The accumulation of these pressures created a heightened sensitivity to recognition, or lack thereof. The omission of the word Duchess, even subtly, was not merely a semantic slip. It was an implicit challenge, a denial of acknowledgement that resonated deeply because it touched on identity, status, and validation in ways that were both public and intensely personal. In the moments leading up to the encounter, Meghan's internal narrative was a careful balancing act. She reminded herself of the importance of calm, of projecting the composure expected of a royal. She recalled every lesson from advisors, every piece of guidance about managing optics, about using body language to assert presence without confrontation. Yet beneath the surface, a flicker of frustration and disbelief brewed. The mind of a duchess is trained to maintain poise, but it is also trained to notice slight deviations, to detect undercurrents of intention, and to weigh them against centuries of protocol and expectation. Every unacknowledged title, every missed gesture, became a signal in the complex matrix of social power. This mindset also carries a certain irony. Meghan had spent years crafting a persona that balanced warmth, accessibility, and dignity, often going out of her way to connect with individuals and the public. She had to be infinitely diplomatic, yet assertive when necessary. Every misstep, whether real or perceived, could be weaponized by critics or blown into sensationalist headlines. In this light, the refusal to call her Duchess wasn't just an isolated act. It was a public stage upon which her emotional intelligence, diplomacy, and resilience would all be tested simultaneously. Her royal mindset also involves a keen awareness of optics, not just for herself, but for the institution she represents. Meghan knew that in public, she embodied more than personal identity. She was a symbol of the monarchy adapting to the modern era, a touchpoint for conversations about diversity, equity, and contemporary royal relevance. Every slight against her could be interpreted as a commentary on these broader cultural themes. The omission by Gwyneth Paltrow, therefore, carried resonance beyond personal insult. It became a moment loaded with symbolic weight, one that had to be navigated delicately to maintain both dignity and influence. Internally, Meghan's thought process was rapid-fire, oscillating between self-restraint and emotional response. She had to manage surprise, irritation, and the urge to assert herself immediately. Every nerve in her body registered the refusal, yet her demeanor had to project calm. In royal life, the public rarely sees the inner turbulence, the quiet but intense emotional calculations, the mental rehearsals of responses, the awareness of consequences for every expression. For Meghan, this was more than a test of etiquette. It was a challenge to her very ability to maintain poise under scrutiny while preserving the authority embedded in her title. And yet, even within this structured mindset, there is room for humanity. Meghan is not a figurehead without feeling. She is a woman who experiences frustration, pride, and indignation in very real, immediate ways. The refusal to use her title tapped into these emotions, producing a complex interplay between controlled composure and internal fire. The public sees the former, the measured nod, the graceful smile, but the latter, the storm beneath the surface, is hidden, yet it drives decisions, reactions, and subtle signals that often speak louder than words themselves. This duality, the outward calm and the internal calculation, is what defines Meghan's royal mindset. It allows her to navigate public spaces with elegance, but it also sharpens sensitivity to every nuance of recognition and respect. When Gwyneth Paltrow declined to address her as Duchess, it was not simply a social misstep. It was a test of Meghan's composure, an intrusion into the delicate balance of public perception and personal dignity, and a flashpoint that exposed the fragile interplay between status, recognition, and human emotion. One could argue that this moment was a microcosm of the broader tension Meghan faces in her life. The constant negotiation between personal identity and public expectation, between asserting oneself and maintaining composure, between modern independence and the weight of centuries-old tradition. The refusal to acknowledge a title in a single interaction became a lens through which all of these pressures were magnified, a moment where private emotions intersected with public spectacle in a way that was both dramatic and emblematic. But here's the crucial point. Meghan's royal mindset is not just about reaction, it is about strategy. Every glance, every pause, every measured smile is part of a broader cognitive framework designed to maintain dignity, navigate scrutiny, and assert subtle authority without overt confrontation. That night, every micro-expression, every nuance of posture, every pause carried meaning, not only for Gwyneth but for the entire audience watching, whether in person or through the lens of media. It was a moment of high-stakes diplomacy in miniature, with consequences that would extend far beyond the premiere itself. And just when it seemed that Meghan had contained the internal storm, that her composure had maintained its flawless veneer, the interaction teetered on the edge of escalation. The refusal to use her title was just the beginning. In the moments that followed, subtle gestures, half-smiles, and whispered comments would layer tension upon tension, setting the stage for a series of events that would grip the public imagination, dominate headlines, and ignite debates about respect, recognition, and power dynamics in both Hollywood and royal spheres. What Meghan didn't yet know, and what the audience would soon discover, was that this single, deliberate omission would be amplified by media scrutiny, analyzed by fans and critics alike, and interpreted in ways that no one could have predicted. The stage was set for drama, tension, and revelation, and the next moves, both subtle and deliberate, would determine not only how the night unfolded, but how history would remember this encounter. Hollywood has always had its own kind of royalty. A kingdom built not on lineage or tradition, but on talent, influence, and cultural sway. And in that world, Gwyneth Paltrow has long occupied a place at the apex. Her name evokes not just film credits and awards, but a carefully curated persona of elegance, sophistication, and independence. She is, in many ways, Hollywood royalty, commanding respect through reputation, intellect, and a persona that blends accessibility with untouchable refinement. To truly understand the tension that unfolded at the Marty Supreme premiere, one must first understand Gwyneth Paltrow, not just as an actress, but as a public figure who has mastered the art of projecting control, confidence, and selective engagement. Gwyneth does not conform to expectations unless it serves her purposes. She has navigated decades in an industry notorious for ruthless competition, maintaining a brand that is simultaneously glamorous, aspirational, and fiercely autonomous. And when it comes to interactions with royalty, celebrities, or the media, she operates with an awareness of optics and subtle power plays that few outsiders recognize. At the premiere, Gwyneth's presence was magnetic. She glided across the red carpet with the poise of someone accustomed to the camera's scrutiny, her gaze steady, her smile measured. Every detail of her appearance, from the sweep of her hair to the cut of her gown, was deliberate, a visual statement designed to convey control, elegance, and sophistication. She understood instinctively how to inhabit the space she occupied, how to command attention without appearing desperate for it. Unlike many who might seek validation or approval, Gwyneth radiated an aura of untouchable independence, a quiet power that made her both admired and envied. Her reputation for selective acknowledgement was well known in Hollywood circles. Gwyneth has never been one to follow conventions blindly, whether in interviews, awards ceremonies, or social gatherings. She maintains a persona that allows her to choose precisely when and how to engage, creating the impression that every word she utters carries significance. In many ways, this selective engagement is a form of control, an ability to assert influence simply by withholding it. The refusal to call Meghan Duchess was consistent with a pattern of behavior that demonstrates not rudeness, but deliberate choice, a subtle exercise of authority in a social setting where attention is a form of currency. Gwyneth's mindset has been shaped by decades of navigating a high-pressure, highly visible environment. In Hollywood, perception often outweighs reality. Every photograph, every interview, every public appearance becomes part of an ongoing narrative, with fans, critics, and the media constructing stories from fragments of reality. Gwyneth understands this, and she uses it to her advantage. By controlling the elements she can, her posture, her facial expressions, her tone, she exerts a quiet dominance that few can match. The red carpet, with its chaos and glare, is not merely a stage for presentation. It is a battlefield of perception, and Gwyneth enters it fully armed with awareness, strategy, and intention. Her independence, however, is not merely a matter of self-presentation. It is deeply ingrained in her character. She is known for asserting boundaries, making choices that align with personal principles, and navigating interactions without being constrained by external expectations. This is why the refusal to acknowledge Meghan's title was not random. It was a deliberate act, consistent with a persona that values autonomy and subtle demonstrations of influence. In Gwyneth's world, a word spoken or withheld can communicate volumes, And this particular choice sent a clear message about control, attention, and hierarchy in a setting where both were at play. The contrast between Meghan's royal mindset and Gwyneth's Hollywood mindset is crucial. Meghan's focus is on etiquette, tradition, and careful maintenance of public perception in accordance with centuries of institutional expectations. Gwyneth operates in a realm where personal branding and selective acknowledgement dominate. When these two approaches intersect, the potential for friction is high. The red carpet, which might have been a simple venue for glamour and celebration, became a theater for the collision of these distinct worldviews. Each woman projecting influence in her own way, each interpreting the other's behavior through a lens shaped by different experiences, expectations, and priorities. Gwyneth's awareness of power dynamics extends beyond personal interaction. She understands the ripple effect of public perception, particularly in moments that can be amplified by media coverage and social commentary. By withholding the word Duchess, she not only asserted her independence in real time, but also created a narrative thread that would capture public attention, provoke debate, and generate analysis. In a way, it was a calculated risk, an acknowledgement that public perception could be influenced by subtle gestures, and that her autonomy could make the interaction more compelling, more dramatic, and ultimately more memorable. It is also worth noting Gwyneth's confidence in her own image. She has cultivated a public persona that is carefully aligned with cultural ideals of elegance, sophistication, and autonomy. She rarely reacts impulsively, yet she understands the power of restraint. The refusal to call Meghan Duchess was an example of this restraint in action, controlled, deliberate, and laden with significance. It was not about disrespect for Meghan personally, but rather a demonstration of the autonomy and decision-making authority that defines Gwyneth's presence in any high-profile environment. This is where the tension becomes palpable. Meghan, conditioned by royal expectations, naturally interprets the omission as a personal slight. Gwyneth, operating within a Hollywood framework, views it as a subtle assertion of independence. The collision of these interpretations, one shaped by centuries-old tradition, the other by contemporary celebrity culture, creates a moment of drama that is simultaneously small and enormous. It is small in duration, just a fleeting exchange on a red carpet. It is enormous in consequence, generating ripples that extend across media, public perception, and personal narratives. And yet, Gwyneth's persona also allows for charm and grace. She is capable of warmth, humor, and engagement when it suits her purposes, which makes her refusal even more potent. It is not grounded in hostility, but in deliberate choice. To observers, it may seem like a slight, a social misstep, or even an insult. To Gwyneth, it is simply a demonstration of control, the ability to dictate the terms of engagement in a public setting. It is a calculated move that balances visibility with autonomy, influence with subtlety, and authority with discretion. In this sense, Gwyneth Paltrow embodies a different kind of power than Meghan Markle. Where Meghan's authority is tied to title, protocol, and public recognition, Gwyneth's authority derives from choice, influence, and the capacity to control narrative. She can decide who receives acknowledgement, who is elevated, and who remains unremarked upon. At the Marty Supreme premiere, this dynamic played out in real time, a subtle yet potent clash between two forms of influence. One historical and formal, the other contemporary and self-styled. Observers would later describe the encounter as electric, tense, and loaded with nuance. Every micro-expression, every shift in posture, every hesitation carried meaning. For Meghan, the omission of the word Duchess was a piercing reminder that acknowledgement is never guaranteed, even for someone of royal stature. For Gwyneth, the choice was a demonstration of autonomy, a subtle assertion of presence that commanded attention without a single word of aggression. The collision of these forces created a moment that transcended the red carpet, leaving audiences, media, and cultural commentators captivated and, in some cases, divided. And the drama didn't end with that brief exchange. While photographers captured stills, journalists scribbled notes, and fans debated online, the real story was unfolding beneath the surface. Inside Meghan's mind, a storm of emotion and calculation was building. Inside Gwyneth's awareness, The deliberate withholding of acknowledgement was already rippling outward, setting the stage for public fascination, speculation, and intrigue. The premiere had become more than an event. It had become a stage for a psychological chess match, a subtle but profound assertion of influence, and a moment that would be replayed and analyzed in countless forms for weeks to come. But even as the night progressed, no one could anticipate the next sequence of events. The moments behind the cameras, the reactions of advisors and inner circles, and the subtle shifts in tension that would escalate this encounter from a public curiosity to a story with global resonance. The moment was almost cinematic. Meghan Markle, poised and graceful, glided across the crimson carpet, her eyes scanning the throng of media, fans, and stars, every step calculated yet fluid. Gwyneth Paltrow, radiant in her signature style, was already in position, a few steps away from the photographer's frenzy, a picture of calm elegance. The tension was invisible but palpable, like static electricity in the air before a storm. Every instinct Meghan had honed over years of public scrutiny told her this encounter would be significant. And yet, no one, neither Meghan, Gwyneth, nor the crowd, could predict just how charged that moment would become. As Meghan approached, she maintained her signature composure. The tightrope she walked was not just between public scrutiny and personal dignity. It was between two worlds, two forms of power, and two interpretations of influence. Meghan, steeped in royal protocol, understood that every gesture mattered. A smile could diffuse tension, a nod could acknowledge authority, a pause could be interpreted as either deference or disapproval. She had mastered the art of subtle signaling over years of public life, and this red carpet was no different. Gwyneth, aware of every eye upon her, met Meghan with a polite smile that was careful but measured. There was a slight tilt of her head, a micro-expression in her gaze that suggested acknowledgement without deference. This was the Hollywood method, subtle, calculated, and precise. In that split second, the air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken communication, the weight of status, power, and recognition pressing against them both. And then it happened. The word that was expected, the acknowledgement Meghan's royal upbringing had prepared her for, was withheld. Duchess. Gwyneth did not say it. Not out of forgetfulness, not by accident, but as a deliberate, almost imperceptible assertion of control. In that instant, the air between them shifted. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing the exchange, but no lens could fully capture the subtle tension, the storm beneath the calm, the collision of personal pride and public protocol. For Meghan, the omission was immediate and visceral. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough for anyone paying attention to notice. Every inch of her body remained composed, yet her mind raced, cataloging the slight, weighing its meaning, and calculating the implications. This was not merely a missed title. It was a challenge, a test, a statement that she was not automatically granted the acknowledgement she had earned and maintained through careful conduct, public service, and the weight of centuries-old titles. Gwyneth, for her part, remained unflustered. Her demeanor was serene, her gaze steady. She understood the power of restraint, the subtle art of letting an omission speak louder than words ever could. In Hollywood, this kind of control is currency. Gwyneth's refusal was not an attack. It was a demonstration of autonomy, a reminder that influence can be exercised without confrontation and recognition can be withheld with precision. Every movement she made, every tilt of her shoulder, every carefully placed smile, reinforced this principle. The photographers sensed it instantly. There was a brief collective pause in the chaos of the red carpet, a subtle acknowledgement of the drama unfolding. Journalists scribbled notes furiously, some whispering to colleagues about what they had just witnessed. Social media, though delayed in real time, would later explode with commentary, speculation, and debate. Fans dissected the interaction, analyzing body language, expressions, and what it might imply about both women. Headlines would later describe the moment with words like snub, tension, power clash, and Hollywood versus royalty. The encounter was not merely personal, it was symbolic. Meghan represented centuries of royal tradition, the expectations of protocol, and the symbolic authority of a duchess. Gwyneth represented Hollywood independence, personal branding, and subtle demonstrations of control. The collision of these forces created a microcosm of larger cultural tensions between historical authority and contemporary influence, between established titles and self-made celebrity, between public expectation and personal autonomy. Every micro-movement in that exchange carried weight. Meghan's measured nod, her careful smile, the slight angle of her posture, all were tools of diplomacy and composure, designed to navigate tension without escalation. Gwyneth's gaze, subtle body language, and calm detachment communicated control, presence, and intentional withholding. Together, these movements told a story far richer than any headline could convey. A story of recognition, power, and the unspoken negotiation of respect in a public setting. For Meghan, the psychological impact was immediate. The omission triggered a cascade of internal responses: surprise, a hint of frustration, an awareness of public optics, and the urgent need to maintain composure. Every instinct trained in royal etiquette now had to reconcile with an unexpected challenge to authority in a sphere where she had less control. It was a delicate balance. Responding with grace while processing the slight, managing the narrative, and preventing personal emotion from spilling into public perception. Gwyneth's choice, however subtle, was amplified by context. She had carefully cultivated a reputation for independence and control, making the refusal a strategic assertion rather than a mere oversight. The power of this act lay not in confrontation but in subtlety, in the unspoken ability to dictate the terms of engagement, to command attention without aggression, and to influence perception through restraint. For Meghan, this was a test, a reminder that even titles and etiquette cannot fully shield one from the nuances of human interaction and social dynamics. Observers later noted the tension in the surrounding environment. Reporters leaned in, whispers spread, and the crowd seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Yet, the drama was almost invisible to the casual eye. This was not a shouting match or an overt confrontation. It was the quiet collision of worlds, a subtle power struggle played out in gestures, glances, and the absence of a single word. And in its subtlety, the moment gained power. The red carpet had transformed from a stage of celebration into a theater of human psychology, influence, and cultural symbolism. Even after the initial exchange, the effects rippled. Meghan's advisors, ever vigilant, monitored the interaction for implications. Gwyneth's team recognized the strategic advantage of subtlety. Social media began to buzz with speculation as audiences analyzed photographs, videos, and anecdotes. Headlines would soon frame the encounter as a snub or tension-filled moment, amplifying the impact of a few seconds of carefully choreographed interaction. In the realm of public perception, these micro-moments can define narratives, and this particular interaction had all the ingredients to dominate cultural conversations for days, if not weeks. What made this encounter particularly compelling was the intersection of personal emotion and public consequence. Meghan's inner storm. Surprise, frustration, and calculation played against the backdrop of Gwyneth's calculated poise. This tension highlighted the intricate balance required in high-profile interactions, where every micro-expression can be interpreted, analyzed, and amplified. It was not merely a personal moment. It was a reflection of broader societal dynamics, including the negotiation of power, influence, and recognition in modern public life. And just when it seemed that the exchange had concluded, that the brief moment of tension had passed, a new layer emerged. Subtle gestures in the following minutes, slight shifts in positioning, brief eye contact, whispered comments behind the press, hinted that the encounter was far from over. The red carpet had set the stage, but the drama would continue to unfold in ways that the public could not yet see. Advisors, media insiders, and even other attendees sensed the unresolved tension, anticipating further ripples that could escalate the story in unpredictable directions. The fateful encounter, brief though it was, had accomplished something remarkable. It created suspense, intrigue, and speculation, all while remaining invisible to those not attuned to subtle social dynamics. It demonstrated the power of restraint, the significance of recognition, and the emotional intensity of public life under scrutiny. For Meghan, It was a reminder that status and composure are tested in every interaction. For Gwyneth, it was a display of strategic influence and calculated independence. And for the world watching, it was a masterclass in subtle drama, one that would be analyzed and debated in countless forms for weeks to come. The red carpet had barely settled after the fateful encounter when the reactions began cascading like dominoes. For Meghan Markle, the emotions were immediate but controlled. Her royal training and years of navigating public scrutiny allowed her to mask the shock and simmering frustration beneath a calm exterior. Every step she took, every smile she offered to other celebrities and photographers, was carefully calculated to project grace and composure. Yet internally, her mind was racing. What had just happened with Gwyneth Paltrow was not just a casual oversight. It was a deliberate statement, one that struck at the heart of recognition, respect, and authority. Within moments, Meghan's team sprang into action, as they always did during high-stakes public appearances. Advisors whispered discreetly into her ear, offering guidance on maintaining composure and redirecting attention. Focus on your interactions with other guests, one suggested. Keep the smile, maintain eye contact, and don't give them a reaction. These whispered instructions were part of a rehearsed playbook, designed to ensure that Meghan's dignity remained intact even in moments of subtle provocation. But the internal pressure was relentless. Each instruction reminded her that the world was watching, that every micro-expression would be captured, scrutinized, and potentially blown up into a headline or viral tweet. Meanwhile, Gwyneth Paltrow appeared entirely unfazed. She had achieved a level of public mastery where such encounters, even ones loaded with symbolic meaning, did not disrupt her equilibrium. Her poise remained impeccable, her demeanor radiating calm authority. For Gwyneth, the subtle refusal to acknowledge Meghan's title was a strategic maneuver executed flawlessly. There was no need for overreaction or verbal confrontation. The absence of acknowledgement spoke volumes, and everyone observing, whether in the room or later via media coverage, would interpret it according to their own biases, assumptions, and curiosity. The crowd itself was an unconscious participant in this unfolding drama. Photographers and journalists sensed the tension immediately. Flashes erupted not just to capture appearances, but to seize the momentary collision of personalities. Whispers among reporters grew louder as they exchanged their interpretations. Was it intentional? Was Meghan offended? How would this affect the perception of her royal image? These questions, though unspoken publicly, circulated like wildfire within the tightly controlled space of the premiere. Social media, though not instantaneous for those in attendance, would amplify the incident exponentially within minutes. Observers who captured video snippets began posting them online, accompanied by speculative commentary. Some viewers noticed the micro-expressions. The subtle flicker of Meghan's surprise, the faintly measured smile, the almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes. Others focused on Gwyneth's composure, noting her serene detachment and the deliberate confidence of her posture. Within an hour, the incident began trending on multiple platforms, transforming a fleeting red carpet interaction into a public spectacle with global reach. Public reaction was polarized almost immediately. Fans of Meghan defended her dignity, expressing outrage at what they interpreted as a snub. Comments ranged from sympathetic to incredulous. How could anyone deny her the recognition of her title, especially in a context as high-profile as a Hollywood premiere? Conversely, Gwyneth's supporters praised her subtle independence, framing the refusal as an example of grace under pressure, personal autonomy, and the power of nonverbal communication. Analysts on entertainment news channels dissected every frame of the interaction, interpreting body language, gaze direction, and timing with near-scientific precision. Within Meghan's inner circle, the encounter sparked a flurry of strategic discussion. Advisors debated the implications. Should she address it publicly or maintain silence? How would press coverage affect her reputation in Hollywood versus the United Kingdom? Could the incident influence upcoming public engagements, interviews, or collaborations? Every decision carried weight, because in the delicate dance of royal and celebrity life, perception is often reality. Even a seemingly minor omission like this could ripple outward, shaping narratives and influencing public opinion in unforeseen ways. Emotionally, The immediate aftermath was a balancing act. Meghan experienced a mixture of surprise, indignation, and acute awareness of public optics. The refusal of a title she had earned and maintained with dignity struck a nerve, not because it was inherently disrespectful, but because it symbolized a denial of acknowledgement in a world where recognition carries social and psychological power. Each subtle gesture and micro-expression was a reminder of the constant negotiation she faced between personal pride and public expectation. Gwyneth's reaction, or lack thereof, added another layer of tension. Her deliberate calm, measured detachment, and controlled body language reinforced the subtle power play at work. For Meghan, this was both a challenge and a puzzle. How to maintain composure without conceding authority, how to respond without giving fuel to media speculation, and how to navigate a space where a single omitted word could feel like a public affront. It was a test of diplomacy, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking all at once. Media outlets quickly amplified the encounter, spinning narratives that ranged from Hollywood snub leaves Duchess fuming to Gwyneth Paltrow demonstrates power of subtlety on the red carpet. Analysts dissected the implications for Meghan's image in Hollywood versus her standing as a member of the royal family. Opinion pieces debated whether such an omission could damage relationships, influence future collaborations, or even highlight tensions between traditional authority and contemporary celebrity culture. Every angle, every interpretation added layers of complexity to an event that, in its raw form, lasted mere seconds. Fans online became amateur analysts. Social media threads exploded with observations, GIFs, and video clips. Commenters debated the meaning of each micro-expression, speculated about private conversations, and shared opinions on who won the encounter. Some viewers sympathized deeply with Meghan, framing the snub as a symbolic challenge to her dignity. Others admired Gwyneth's poise, interpreting her restraint as a masterful exercise of personal influence. The incident, though fleeting, became a cultural touchstone. A moment that crystallized broader societal conversations about power, recognition, and the subtle dynamics of high-profile interactions. Even beyond the cameras and the crowd, the ripple effects continued to spread. Behind the scenes, advisors and PR teams began drafting potential responses, considering whether to issue clarifications, statements, or interviews. They weighed every possible outcome. Reinforcing Meghan's image of composure, addressing the slight without inflaming controversy, or strategically remaining silent to allow the narrative to unfold organically. Each decision carried risk, because in a world where perception drives influence, even minor missteps could become magnified. And yet, amidst the whirlwind of public and private reactions, there remained an undeniable truth. The encounter had succeeded in capturing attention. It had become a lens through which broader themes of recognition, autonomy, and influence could be explored. It demonstrated the power of subtlety, the weight of symbolism, and the intricate interplay of emotion and strategy in high-profile interactions. What might have seemed trivial to an unobservant bystander, a single omitted word, was in fact a moment pregnant with meaning, resonating far beyond the red carpet in ways few could immediately perceive. As the night continued, Meghan maintained her composure outwardly, engaging with other celebrities, posing for photos, and moving through the event with grace. Internally, however, her mind replayed the encounter repeatedly, analyzing each detail, weighing implications, and considering next steps. The refusal to acknowledge her title was a stark reminder that recognition cannot be commanded. It must be earned, negotiated, and sometimes subtly claimed in moments that matter. Meanwhile, Gwyneth's poise remained steady, unaffected by the escalating attention. She had mastered the art of subtle influence, demonstrating that power can be exerted without confrontation, that authority can be signaled without words, and that recognition is both a gift and a choice. In the controlled environment of a premiere, she had claimed her space, asserted her autonomy, and shaped the narrative, all without raising her voice, uttering a complaint, or breaking composure. But as the night wore on and media coverage began to intensify, the encounter's impact began to seep into broader narratives. Analysts speculated on how this moment might influence Meghan's interactions in Hollywood circles, affect public perceptions of her as a duchess, and highlight the tension between traditional titles and modern celebrity influence. The stage was set for a public conversation that would continue to unfold long after the lights of the premiere dimmed, extending the stakes far beyond the initial seconds of interaction. And just as the immediate reaction settled into a quiet, tense hum, the first signs of a larger consequence began to appear. Whispers behind the scenes, subtle shifts in alliances, and strategic recalibrations within Meghan's team hinted that the story was far from over. The ripple effects were only beginning. The red carpet had been a theater of subtle tension, but the real drama began after the cameras started processing the event. Behind the flashbulbs and rolling lenses, a media machine kicked into overdrive. Editors, producers, and journalists across continents scrambled to interpret, frame, and amplify the encounter between Meghan Markle and Gwyneth Paltrow. For the casual observer, the interaction had lasted mere seconds. But for the media, those seconds were a goldmine of narrative, speculation, and controversy. The moment the first photographs circulated, newsrooms lit up. Social media editors flagged the frames where Meghan's expression registered the faintest hint of surprise, the almost imperceptible tension in her posture. Video clips captured the split-second exchange where Gwyneth withheld the word Duchess, the subtle flicker in her gaze, the poised detachment of her gestures. For editors, these micro-moments were headline gold. A single frame could tell multiple stories: a royal snub, a clash of power, a cultural tension between Hollywood and monarchy. Every pixel carried potential drama. As coverage intensified, journalists dissected the event with surgical precision. Analysts debated the significance of the omission, weighing whether it was a minor oversight, a subtle power play, or an intentional affront. Headlines began to appear. Duchess fumed. Gwyneth Paltrow snubs Meghan at Hollywood premiere, red carpet tension, royalty meets Hollywood independence, and Gwyneth versus Meghan, the subtle snub everyone's talking about. Each headline was designed not just to inform, but to provoke emotion, curiosity, and clicks. The story was no longer about the premiere itself. It had become a cultural touchstone, a moment of symbolic significance that would dominate conversation for days. Social media amplified the frenzy exponentially. Video clips, GIFs, and still images spread across platforms within minutes. Commenters analyzed every nuance: Meghan's controlled smile, the precise angle of Gwyneth's head, the timing of each gesture. Opinions ranged from outrage to admiration, with some viewers defending Meghan's dignity and others praising Gwyneth.